Smoke curled into the night sky, thick and suffocating, as the flames consumed what had once been a home filled with love, laughter, and history. The crackling of burning wood was drowned out by the distant wails of sirens, and the murmur of horrified neighbors gathering at a safe distance. Malcolm Carter stood motionless, his strong frame silhouetted by the blaze, his fists clenched at his sides. His home, his family's legacy, was gone. Before we continue with this intriguing story, please let us know where you are watching from. Hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell for more inspiring stories. Thanks. The fire had not started on its own. The spray-painted slurs on what little remained of the outer walls, the shattered windows, and the eerie silence of those responsible confirmed what Malcolm already knew. This was an attack. An act of hatred. A message. Sheriff Dean Matheson approached cautiously, his face lined with something between regret and exhaustion. Malcolm, you gonna tell me you're investigating? Malcolm's voice was hoarse, raw from the smoke, but there was no mistaking the steel in it. Like you did the last time? And the time before that? Dean sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. We're looking into it. But you and I both know they won't face a day behind bars. Malcolm finished for him, his eyes locked onto the wreckage. Because men like them don't get punished in towns like this. The crowd grew, whispers rippling through it like wind through dry grass. Some murmured words of sympathy, others barely concealed their satisfaction. Malcolm's mother, Eloise, a woman whose resilience was carved into every line on her face, stepped forward, placing a hand on her son's shoulder. Baby, we ain't got time to grieve, she said softly. We rebuild. Malcolm's house was home to 3 people, himself, his younger sister, Aaliyah, and their elderly mother, Eloise. The house had been in their family for generations, serving as a place of love, history, and resilience. When the fire destroyed it, they lost more than just walls and a roof. They lost memories, security, and the place they had always called home. Malcolm is not yet married. He had dedicated much of his life to taking care of his mother and sister, especially after his father passed away when he was a teenager. While he had relationships in the past, his main priority had always been his family and the community he served. A scoff broke the moment. What's the point? The voice belonged to Tyler Grayson, a local mechanic who had been fighting the same battles Malcolm had his entire life. They'll just burn it down again. Or worse. Then we build again, Eloise said firmly, her voice unwavering. And we keep building until they understand they can't erase us. Despite previous attacks and threats from the racist group, there was no CCTV installed in the house. The family had always relied on their tight-knit community for protection, believing that their neighbors would always have their back. Additionally, Malcolm had spoken to the local authorities before, but with limited resources and lack of immediate action from law enforcement, he had not yet taken further security measures. The lack of surveillance turned out to be a significant setback when the attack happened. A silence followed, thick with the weight of Eloise's words. Then, from the back of the crowd, a young woman stepped forward. Sarah Levine, white, privileged, and until now silent. She had grown up in the same town, had known Malcolm since they were kids, but had never spoken up, never challenged the ways of her own people. Until now. I'll help, she said. Her voice was quiet but resolute. I have money saved. And my father owns a construction company. He won't like it, but he doesn't control me. A murmur of shock rippled through the onlookers. Malcolm turned to her, searching her face for mockery or pity. He found neither. He nodded once. Then let's get to work. The next morning, the first truck arrived. Then another. And another. People who had never spoken to Malcolm before, who had been too afraid or too indifferent to stand by him, began to show up. Some brought wood, others tools. Some just brought their hands and willingness to work. By noon, the foundation had been cleared of ashes, and new lumber was being measured and cut. Not everyone was pleased. The same group that had set the fire, men who had hidden behind masks, fueled by hate and the belief that they were untouchable, watched from a distance. Their leader, Grant Holloway, sneered as he saw the construction begin. "They don't know when to quit," he spat. His brother, Luke, scowled. "Let 'em build. We'll tear it down again." But the work continued. Days turned into weeks. The skeleton of the house rose, defiant against the history that sought to bury it. And then, one night, the sound of shattering glass pierced the silence. Malcolm had been waiting. He stepped onto his unfinished porch to see Grant and his men, their faces no longer hidden, rage burning in their eyes. "You just don't learn, do you?" Grant growled, gripping a crowbar. Malcolm didn't flinch. "Neither do you." From the shadows, figures emerged: Sheriff Matheson, Tyler, Sarah, and dozens of others who had come together to rebuild. Some held cameras, others held weapons of their own. The mob had come expecting fear, submission. Instead, they found unity. "You so much as take one step closer," Dean warned, his hand resting on his holster, "and you'll finally see what justice looks like." Grant hesitated, scanning the crowd. The town had changed. The people had changed. He realized, too late, that he and his kind were no longer untouchable. As the mob stood frozen in shock, the reality of the situation dawned on them. They had come expecting to finish what they started: intimidation, destruction, and dominance, but instead they found themselves outnumbered. The sheriff and armed community members formed an unbreakable wall, blocking any path of escape. Cameras captured every detail: the sneers of the attackers turning into expressions of fear, the weapons still clutched in their hands, the torches that were meant to reduce Malcolm's life to ashes now useless in their grasp. Sheriff Matheson, stepping forward, issued a firm command. "Drop your weapons! You're under arrest." His voice was calm, but there was no mistaking the steel behind it. Slowly, Grant stepped back, rage twisting his features, but no words came. Some of the attackers hesitated, their bravado fading. Tyler, Sarah, and the others in the community stood their ground, ready to fight if needed. The sight of multiple witnesses, the recording devices in plain view, and the sheriff's unwavering presence made resistance futile. Slowly, one by one, the members of the racist group dropped their weapons. Backup law enforcement officers arrived moments later, securing the scene and arresting every member of the hate group. It was the first time in a long while that they faced consequences for their actions. The town had looked away for too long, but tonight was different. Tonight, the community had spoken. Malcolm, standing beside his mother and sister, watched the scene unfold. The anger in his chest burned as fiercely as the fire that had destroyed their home. His mother, Eloise, gripped his hand tightly, her eyes filled with both sadness and determination. They had suffered too much to let this go unanswered. With the evidence stacked against the group, Malcolm and his family made the decision to press charges. This wasn't just about their house. It was about sending a message. Hatred wouldn't go unchecked. With the support of the community and a team of civil rights attorneys who quickly stepped in, they pursued legal action against the perpetrators for arson, destruction of property, harassment, and a federal hate crime charge. The trial became a national headline. Every testimony, every piece of footage from that night, every past attack that had gone unpunished was laid bare before the court. The mob had operated under the belief that no one would dare to stand against them. But this time, the town stood united. Justice wasn't immediate, and the legal battle was long and exhausting. But when the final verdict was read, the weight of generations of fear and injustice lifted. Convictions were handed down, prison sentences were issued, and the precedent was set. The town would never be the same again. As Malcolm and his family stepped out of the courtroom months later, Tyler, Sarah, and the rest of the community members stood waiting for them, just as they had on the night of the attack. This time, there were no weapons, only smiles, support, and an unspoken promise that they would never stand alone again. Weeks later, the house stood tall, now completed, stronger than before. But it wasn't just Malcolm's house, it was the town's victory, a symbol of defiance and progress. At the housewarming, people from all walks of life gathered, sharing food, laughter, and stories. As Malcolm stood in his new doorway, his mother beside him, he looked out at the faces of those who had helped build it, Not just a house, but a community. A future. Sarah approached, offering a small box. Inside was a plaque, simple but powerful. We stand together. Malcolm swallowed the lump in his throat. We do, he murmured. And for the first time in a long time, he believed it. What do you think about the community coming together to resist the racist group? Share your thoughts in the comment section. Also tell us where you are watching from. And if you enjoyed this story, please like, share, and hit the subscribe button. Do not forget to turn on the notification bell for more inspiring stories.